Well, I think we've reached the end.
This is the end.
This is... Yeah.
We can just change it if we want, though.
We can just change it. Yeah, that's true.
Hello, and welcome to Raise a Glass, the podcast where we talk about the stories and storytellers that have shaped our lives. My name is Eric Lintola.
And I am Hunter Danson.
Hunter, today we're going to be talking about She-Hulk and Rings of Power. Maybe not in that order. But before we get into that, what is in your glass today?
I know nobody sees this, but I feel like I actually have to grab my glass. I have some good old peppermint tea.
Nice. I feel like we should plan these things out so we're having at least somewhat similar things, because I did not go the hot non-alcoholic beverage route. I went for the end of summer Ruby Red Kolsch.
Nice.
It's a grapefruit base. It's fruity beer. Normally I don't like them, but I think it's pretty good.
Yeah. Well, I noticed I'd been having a lot of alcoholic drinks the past few episodes, so I don't want people to think I'm an alcoholic.
Okay. Great.
Whatever. I don't...
Noted.
Just because you're a writer does not mean you have to become an alcoholic, okay?
Hey, you actually have a happy life.
Yes. You can have a family. You don't have to be self-destructive.
But what is true art without self-destructive nature?
Oh, don't get me started.
Hunter, what is it that you are raising a glass and or pouring one out for this week?
Well, I'm pouring one out for the war on leaves, which has commenced in my neighborhood. We fight them on the driveway. We fight them in the front yard. We fight them in the backyard. And there is a leaf blower seemingly going 24/7 in our neighborhood, which is something that I think only I notice, because I'm kind of sensitive to noise, especially when I'm trying to record a chapter of my book or something like that. And also my finger, because I was putting on my socks and I bent my fingernail backwards because my nails were too long. And it's the same finger that I peeled a couple weeks ago.
Oof.
But it's fine.
I've got a nicely peeled finger as well from pears. 5 or 6 peel cuts.
Yeah. I do have something I'm raising a glass to, but I'll let you.
Great. No, go for it. What are you raising a glass
to? I'm raising a glass to the prophet Isaiah, who I've been reading lately for the first time in a while. And I've just been, it's been really nice, which is not something you'd usually say about the prophet Isaiah, I guess, or reading the Bible, especially the Old Testament. But he has some great lines. And some of my favorites are, "Do not say conspiracy every time these people say the word." And
that feels like a very appropriate thing to say nowadays.
Yeah. Listen continually, but don't understand. Look continually, but don't perceive. Beware, those who pull evil along using cords of emptiness are as good as dead. And last one. When one looks out over the land, he sees distress and darkness, gloom and anxiety, darkness and people forced from the land. The gloom will be dispelled for those who were anxious. The people walking in darkness see a bright light.
Mm.
Light shines on those who live in a land of deep darkness.
Wow, that feels like something straight out of Tolkien. Like if you like said that was in Lord of the Rings, I've read it multiple times. I've been like, yeah, I see that.
Yeah, well, I'm sure he read Prophet Isaiah as well.
I'm sure many a time. That's awesome. Thanks for sharing those pieces.
Yeah.
I am strangely enough, I'm also going to be pouring one out for my two fingers. Actually, you can see them here. I played the bass in a church band for the first time in a while.
Ooh.
And I can tell it's been a while because I have a blood blister on my index finger, and I have just a regular blister on my middle finger, both in the right hand. And it was so bad on Sunday, like Sunday evening, that I tried to write with a pen, and I couldn't grab it. So like I had to like put it between my knuckles on my right hand to try and write. It was sad. I was like, I don't want to pop these. It's uncomfortable. But I am raising a glass to garbage plates. I proudly live and love living here in Rochester, New York, which is the home of the White Hot, the home of French's Mustard, and the home of the garbage plate. Nick Tahos is the one that claims the first garbage plate. And a couple of my friends, one of whom is Andrew, who's been listening to a lot of our episodes. So, hey, Andrew, if you're out there, made garbage plates for myself and some friends this on Monday. And they were delicious.
For those who don't know,
meat sauce.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, yeah.
I was going to make a joke, but
no, go for it.
Killed us.
Okay, no.
I was going to say for those of you who don't know, a garbage plate is when people in Rochester go out to the garbage and put a bunch of stuff on the plate.
So funny. You're just so funny, Hunter. But you're right. I should probably describe what a garbage plate is. A garbage plate is everything that you would have at a great picnic, minus the fruit salad, on a plate on top of each other. So usually you start with some type of starch, some type of potato. Fries or tater tots are kind of a typical piece. And on that, you put some combination of burgers, either cheeseburgers or hamburgers, or a red hot dog or a white hot, which is another Rochester thing. And then on that, you put a meat sauce. Nick Tahos has a sweeter sauce. A lot of them have a little bit spicier sauce. Often people put raw onions, mac salad. It's macaroni salad, if you don't understand that slang. Mustard, ketchup, and you eat it together. And it is so much better than it sounds, and yet exactly what it sounds like.
I don't think I had a garbage plate when I visited.
No?
Not yeah.
Oh my goodness. Oh, we'll have to do it next time.
Yeah.
That's a must-have.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about these stories. I just want to give people a little bit of background. Hunter and I made an audible yesterday evening from deciding about talking about two other shows, which we to these two shows. So can I tell them what shows we were going to talk about?
Yeah.
Okay. Hunter and I both are big fans to differing degrees of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the MCU. And both of our favorite like secondary characters in the MCU, both of whom have their own TV show, are Peggy Carter and Matt Murdock, or Daredevil. Spoilers. And so we were going to talk about those two shows. But I know I'm currently in a rewatch of Daredevil, watching it with my wife, as it's now going to hopefully 2024. I think is the plan for a new season of that.
Oh, okay.
And we realized that we'd rather give each of those shows one full episode at some point down the line, than trying to share them. And we also realized we have both been watching and have now finished She-Hulk and Rings of Power. So felt a little bit appropriate to talk about two stories that are part of grander things that have shaped us as far as like stories. We had an entire episode on Tolkien, and MCU, but we decided to kind of focus in on these two, and that by itself should probably be a pretty good indication of our how much we would decide to raise a glass towards it or pour it out. That we've decided to push both of them into one episode instead of doing an episode for each.
Yeah. Well,
anything to add?
No, we'll see how it goes. I'm feeling kind of meandery, so because I think there's a lot of other people reacting to stuff. So I don't know. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah.
See where it goes.
Well, Hunter, do you want to launch with Rings of Power or She-Hulk?
Rings of Power, I think.
Okay, great. Can you give us an overview, if somebody hasn't watched the show, kind of what happens in the show? Again, full spoilers.
Okay.
We're talking through the end now.
Yeah, full spoilers through the end. So Rings of Power is about the forging of the Rings of Power. And I guess you follow Galadriel and Halbrand, and you follow Elrond and Doran, and you follow Nori and the other Harfoots, who are like proto-hobbits, and this kind of strange man crashes out of the sky that you immediately recognize as Gandalf. And they try to be all mysterious about it, but it's Gandalf. They try to trick you in the end too, but it's Gandalf. And it is a stunningly, I'm just jumping into my review, I guess.
I was hoping you'd give us a little bit more of a background. You named a bunch of characters, but if people don't know who they are already, they might not be helpful. So, like the first two characters you named were elves, and then there was a Harfoot. Nori, for any Hobbit fans out there, is not a dwarf. It's not Nori from Ori, Nori, and Dory. Right. The first time that Nori was introduced as Nori, I was like, wait, this looks like a halfling girl, not a dwarf male. So
yeah,
and you also missed Arendir, who I think is one of the shining lights in the show.
Oh yes, yeah, Arendir and Bronwyn and their son.
Yeah.
And they all have kind of interweaving plots that come together at the end. Galadriel is obsessed with finding Sauron. Sauron killed her brother, and that's one of the reasons she's so obsessed. And she's a very militant Galadriel. If you know anything about Galadriel from the books or the movies, even if you've just seen the movies, this is struck me as more of she's a fighting Galadriel. She has lots of fight choreography, and she's an elf, and she almost finds Sauron in like the opening, and then she kind of gets dealt this backhanded honor of getting sent into the West to live eternally with the Valor. When elves don't really die unless they're killed in battle, but they sail west to the Valor from Middle Earth. The Valar are west of Middle Earth, and only the elves are permitted to go to the Valar. The Valar are basically angels.
And Frodo.
Yeah, and Frodo. Frodo gets to go. And Gandalf.
But he's ancient.
Yeah, he's a wizard. So, Galadriel is about to go cross which is a very visually striking scene. Everything is visually striking in this.
Oh my goodness, this is one of the most visually beautiful shows I've ever seen. It's like, why blink? Like, there's no reason to blink in this show.
Yeah, just
because you're gonna miss some type of stunning. Everything they do, they just like poured so much money into it that it's stunning. Like the doors opening, not just the doors themselves, but the way they open or the way they close is just like, what?
Yeah.
What a great, brilliant idea. I'm sure somebody spent hours of their life not just like making this thing, but planning what this thing was going to look like when it was made.
Yeah. So Galadriel dives off the boat, and she goes back because she hasn't found Sauron, and she needs to continue her fight. And that's where you meet Halbrand. He's kind of floating on a raft with a bunch of other people who have been shipwrecked by a Leviathan.
Mm-hmm.
And Halbrand is supposedly a king of the Southlands. Turns out to be Sauron, which I pegged in like the second episode.
Did you?
I did, yes.
I'm impressed.
Yeah, I have screenshots to prove it.
I believe you.
Yeah. Well, because he mentioned he was into smithing, and that's Sauron's whole thing for forging the rings.
Yeah. It took me embarrassingly too long to get there. But in my defense, I haven't finished the Silmarillion.
Yeah. Yeah, I think if you have read the Silmarillion, it was... There were also leaks, apparently. I didn't know about the leaks, but I learned about them
while
I was watching the last episode. But yeah. And so then, it's kind of her befriending Halbrand and then figuring out that he is Sauron. They wind up in Numenor, which is an island that is west of Middle-earth. That is kind of like a race of blessed men who were blessed really by the Valor because they fought. Yeah, they fought against Morgoth, so they're not immortal like the elves, but they have longer life. In the books, they're like taller and stronger. Aragorn is descended from
faster, Sonic X.
Yeah, Aragorn is descended from Numenor, and you meet Aragorn's grandfather, right? No,
it's more than that.
Yeah, well, he's descended from Elendil, and Isildur, who is Elendil's son. And you get some stuff with Elendil and Isildur and Isildur's sister, who's not in the books. And there's some weird, like, some dude hitting on Isildur's sister.
They're trying to make her a whole thing, like, for the next season, I felt like. Because she also looked into the Seeing Stone at the end. Before the king died.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Also, is the Queen Regent is in the books? In the Silmarillion?
There is a queen that is mentioned, I think.
Okay.
I don't know if she has as big of a role as the show gave her. But there is kind of like a queen whose husband dies and she rules Numenor for a little while. I fairly certain. In one form or another, there's a queen. But
so, Hunter, I'm just gonna put in just 45 seconds to tell the rest of the story. Go.
Numenor people go to Middle-earth where they meet Arondir and all of the other characters except for the Harfoots. Big battle with some dude who's a fallen elf and he's not Sauron. Find out Halbrand is Sauron. Sauron tricks him into forging 3 rings. But they kind of get wise to it, sort of. And so they forge the 3 elven rings, which are kind of important in the universe. And Harfoots are really loyal to this weird, strange man that almost gets them killed. And then there's a fight with these like anime metal punk guys and Gandalf that think Gandalf is Sauron, and Gandalf
I don't get them at all.
Blows him up.
It turns them into moths.
Yeah. Because Gandalf and moths is a motif in the movies, kind of.
I just did a spot on impression of Gandalf stuck on top of oh my goodness, what's the name of Sauron's tower? Sauron's tower, Harthank
in Isengard.
Yeah, but it's like
Orthanc.
Orthanc. Talking with the moth and then the eagles coming. Did a spot on impression of that.
There's also a cheesy font change from the Southlands to Mordor.
Yep. So let's talk about this. There's been a lot of talks about this. I know we're not normally a reactions podcast, and we've really, I think, have maybe spoken too much about the impact of Tolkien on our lives. This is very different from The Hobbit, which was very different from the Lord of the Rings. And I'd love to get some of your. We've already talked about how beautifully, like visually awe-inspiring this show is, and I honestly still think it felt like a Tolkien type show for most of it. I thought they established the universe well. I wasn't interested very much in many of the storylines, but just trying to give us a little bit of a structure to the conversation we have. Maybe we talk a little bit of our thoughts on how the show went, and then maybe we speak, I don't know, more into the way that the story was told and to the desires we would have to maybe even create a Tolkien-based lore. Could be some ideas for where we go.
Yeah, we'll see. I don't know. I'm just gonna say up front, I didn't like it. It was incredibly disappointing for me, and I also want to say, like, there's a fair amount of, especially in the subreddit, there's a fair amount of like vitriol and making fun of characters and actors, and I cannot stress this enough. The actors are too good for this show.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Because I have never seen such a waste of talent and money thrown onto a screen with such soulless direction and soulless writing.
Wow, this is getting intense.
It is. It's just baffling to me. Because you look at the screen and the screen is literally glowing when you're looking at it, and you're like, how could they spend this much money and make it look this good? And yet, I don't feel a thing. The only times I felt something was like a few performances from the actors. And that's why I say the actors are too good for the show, because like anytime Ishmael Cruz Cordoba was on the screen, he plays Arendir, who is an elf of color. But like he was the elf I believed the most.
He was so good.
He was amazing.
And they took him out of the last episode. He wasn't even in it. Was he in the last episode?
Yeah. Like I felt him whenever he was on the screen, whatever situation he was in, like the way he communicated with his face and his body language and his voice, like such good acting. Especially, I mean, I think they gave him more to act with than like Nori, who was also a good actor, but it's just like everyone is good. It's just like there's some baffling little things, I guess, some pet peeves of mine were the hair. Like when Elrond and Celebrimbor were talking about the rings, and for some reason they made Elrond and Galadriel like really bullish about making these rings, which in the Silmarillion, they're kind of wise to what Sauron is trying to do. Sauron is kind of like this smith. Basically, that's how he presents himself. Is still fair in those days, Tolkien says, but Elrond and Galadriel don't really trust him, so he goes to Celebrimbor, and I was looking at like Celebrimbor and Elrond, and I just imagine them talking about like a really hot stock option. Like, hey man, we got to get in on this ring stuff because it's gonna go through the roof. Because their hair is just like it. I just looked like they were on Wall
Mithril
Street.
is the new currency where it's at.
Yeah,
crypto Mithril. Oh, that's really funny.
Oh, sorry. I'll say one more thing,
which isn't on the actors.
Yeah, I'll say. Yeah, and it's not on the actors. Like Elrond, as much as his hairstyle has really dropped the ball, like he's still a good actor, and the scenes with him and Durin are some of my favorite.
Oh, they're so fun. And Durin's wife,
yes, Disa.
She, the point where she was at one point, she sings to the rocks to help get, I think, 3 or 4 dwarves out of a cave in while they're trying to mine mithril. And like the whole space like resonates, and you can like feel it in your soul, the song, and you can see the actor who plays Elrond could feel it in his soul too, and he's like, what is this? Like that was a really like intense and moving scene.
Yeah, that was a good one. There's little gems of scenes throughout, but.
And I think you hit on the point. This is, at any point you could pause this show, and like frame the picture, and you can point to just. I don't think I knew any of these actors or actresses before watching the show, and I'm interested in watching things with all of them. Like I think the actress who plays Galadriel, like just knocks out of the park. I think she does a great job personally. And like but the characters are all pretty wooden. Like Elendil seems like a really cool character. But like it's almost like they try to do too much at once, and like I don't even understand. Like they brought in Gandalf and the Harfoots just like to, like Gandalf was around in this age, but like they brought in that whole story. They created that whole story arc just to like draw in fans who like wanted to see hobbits and expected to see hobbits.
You know what it felt like? It felt like they were trying to echo the motifs of the movies with the Harfoots, because Frodo finds a ring and Nari finds a naked meteor man. But it's like she goes on an adventure. She's an adventurous hobbit, just like Bilbo and Frodo. And I didn't text you my reactions to the finale. I sent them in, I was writing them down, and I don't know how much of my handwriting you can read, but I think there was one moment in the finale where it was
pulling him up now.
Yeah, it was one moment where it was like, quote, adventures must be shared. And this was like one of the moments in the whole thing with the Harfoots that I felt, not necessarily because of the strength of the show, but just because of Tolkien's, the spirit of Tolkien's writing, and the background, the history I had with that, and that moment kind of echoing that. There's this essay by Tolkien. I'll link it in the notes. I can't get it off the top of my head now, but he quotes this kind of, it's on fairy stories, and he's talking about this kind of the spirit of a fairy story, which is basically fantasy story. And he says, he quotes this kind of old English poem and I can't do it justice, but he's like, there's that one smooth path that goes straight, um, to a good righteous life, but that kind of windy path through the forest is the one which I might take, and that is kind of the spirit of adventure that I think Tolkien captures in The Hobbit, of just the magic of that sentence: "In a hole in the ground there lived a hobbit," and going on an adventure. But this show, it was trying to do that with the Harfoots, but I couldn't feel it.
I almost feel like this show started with too many characters that they wanted us to deeply care about. Instead of starting with Frodo and building, or Bilbo, and like building a team from there, we kind of went with, okay, let's start in 4 different places with 4 different groups, and like maybe eventually have them interact. But like, I don't even know if they ever will interact. Like, I don't see any way in which they're kind of like maybe going east now that they've been west. Like the cast was, it felt like they were trying to start a show in the 4th season instead of starting where it should begin. And one of the beautiful things about many journeys is they start off small. And they had the beauty of deciding in the Second Age, small could have been just following Galadriel.
Yeah.
In the first episode or 2. And like maybe do some cool like flashbacks to what was happening in the other pieces. And they were building up to like these big reveals as well. So instead of small reveals on the way, like there were a few, 2 big reveals, I think. One is the Sauron thing. Maybe 3. Mithril is one, probably. And then the other one, I think, but the midway point of this show was sticking this sword into the ground and turning it and opening up pretty much a levee, and this water poured down into the tunnels that these orcs had been spending the first 5 episodes digging. That at this point you'd kind of forgotten about. You're like, oh, maybe they're just digging it because they can't be in the sun. And then the water goes through all these tunnels into a mountain, which you learn is a dormant volcano, and all the water hits it and it causes the volcano to erupt. And then you're like, oh, this is Mount Doom. And now the Southlands have become Mordor. And it happens right after the Numenorians come to save the Southland people, when you see 2 or 3 of the storylines connect, which was kind of cool and like epic to watch, like visually epic.
Some amazing water effects, I have to say.
And volcano.
Right, yes. All
like,
those...
The burning horse.
Yeah. I have what was with all the horse shots? Like, there's this one early on with Halbrand and Galadriel, and it's just like a slow motion Fabio horse. And there are just all these really weird, very specific shots focused on the horse. I don't
know. Is this show so bad in your mind, Hunter, that it does a disservice to Tolkien's legacy, or not? Or how would you compare it to your experience of The Hobbit?
I think that Tolkien's legacy is in his words, and that can't be touched. This show is something different for me. This show, I think, is a waste. A huge waste of money and talent. And it's not like there aren't moments that are enjoyable. I mean, they there were so many people working on this, um, but it's. I really liked the first Hobbit movie. I watched it like 3 or 4 times, um, and the second and third one, um, I watched and mainly watched a lot of stuff about the production of it and how they brought in Peter Jackson like very late in the process.
Mhm.
Originally, it was going to be Guillermo del Toro, which every time I think about Guillermo del Toro doing The Hobbit, I take a stab in the heart because they would have been so. Guillermo's one of my favorite directors. But Peter Jackson, I think he says at one point, we were laying the track as we were going on it. And
Yeah, there are videos of him like writing the scenes right before they shoot the scenes.
yeah. And, presumably they had something to go in for the first one. And then as it kept going, it just got more and more out of control.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, the Hobbit trilogy feels more like a genuine like catastrophe as the movies keep going on.
I saw the light
like
fade from the sky.
Yes.
On the wind I heard a cry as the snowflakes cover my fallen brothers. I will say this last goodbye.
Yeah, there's some beautiful music in it too.
That was the only point that got me crying in the second or third movie.
Yeah,
that was like they ruined Bjorn.
Yeah. So,
but okay. So sorry,
yeah,
I interrupted.
I'll bring it into I'll let you go. I don't want to monopolize, but here's what I'll say: the Hobbit felt like watching the process of a train crashing in real time. This was more like watching I don't know. It was more like finding out that they're building a track somewhere that you have no like building a train track to the middle of Antarctica, or somewhere that like you have no idea why they need to go there, and it's a very incredibly well built train, maybe the best train that's ever been built, but it has no point except for like Jeff Bezos wanted to build it there. I don't know. It's just like why do I need to see this like weird exchange between the Queen and Elendil about stairs?
Yeah.
And why do I need to see
9 steps, not 8?
Yes. And why I never asked for this from Tolkien. And I never asked for Isildur like eating half of an apple and throwing the whole thing in the sea when he could have gone and fed it to his horse. It's just the question I come away with is why. But
yeah,
I'll give it up.
Okay. I enjoyed this show clearly more than you did. I had high expectations for the show and it did not meet them. But I, without a doubt, will watch a second season of it. If for no other reason than your analogy of it is the most beautiful train I've ever seen built. Every piece about it is stunning. And if they change out who's doing the writing, we now have Sauron. We now have the 3 Rings of Power. We now have like a group of people together that can be like, I don't know. I feel like we're now in a much better spot than we were in the beginning of the first season. Because I feel like the first season has answered questions I didn't really care about. And did it in a way that was beautiful to watch, but like not interesting. But I think that the show will only get better. And it has to in order for them to they're gonna make more seasons of it. They can't not, because of the amount of money they've already poured into it. I don't see any way that they wouldn't. But I think it will get better. And I'm not worried about the quality of the actors or the quality of the show. I'm just the dialogue and like the what actually happens. Like it's going to look beautiful when it does happen, but like and now Gandalf is not a puppy, as you had said in the first episode or second episode. Yeah. He finally has his own voice, which is encouraging. I don't understand at all why they had to add those like 3 random people chasing him.
That was so weird. I mentioned anime, and I've seen some anime, and anime can be a good thing, but it didn't. That style does not work in Tolkien, and I don't like. No. Why did they have boob armor and like?
Yeah, why did they turn into other people?
Why are their eyes? It was.
Their fingers were black, but they like the rest.
It was just like totally out of left field, and I don't know. I almost feel like it would have been better if it wasn't supposed to be Lord of the Rings. At least,
it's almost like the directors and or whoever makes the decision about this in TV shows just kept saying yes whenever anybody asks them about something, and maybe they should have made a lot more no's to help kind of give the story a line. But the interesting thing about talking about Rings of Power versus She-Hulk, and I'm going to make a transition here. Is there anything you want to say before we transition?
I don't want to watch season 2.
Okay.
I want to read Lord of the Rings again. It's about taste. That time.
Good taste back in the mouth.
Yeah, there was just like one line of dialogue. They say, with 3 there is balance, when they're talking about how many rings they want to forge. And it just sounds like the kind of like bogus plot reason that Tolkien would not accept. And like, but I need to read it again. I need to read Lord of the Rings again, and I need to read the Silmarillion again to refresh it in my mind and go back to his world and his words, and not the words that other people are, not other people's interpretations of them.
Yeah. I mean, Tolkien used a lot of words, but none of his words were cheap.
Mm-hmm.
And it felt like there was a lot of kind of cheapness in this. And the stakes were too high and yet not high enough and not interesting enough. And yeah, I don't think it's one I'm going to raise a glass to, but I can't justify pouring one out because it's just so beautiful. And there are enough good things about this show that I think it's, if you want to watch a show that is just going to just be awe, like the feeling of awe is very normal in this show. Just because it's incredible and it doesn't look fake, which is not the case with some parts of She-Hulk. But it's not like telling you something that's gonna cause you to think, or even like cause you to cheer that much either.
Yeah, I'll raise a glass to the talent on display, to the actors, to the poor guys who must have spent countless hours animating that water. And all those smoke effects. I have a friend who is pretty good at Blender, and like smoke effects and water simulations, and that's very costly. It takes a lot of power and a lot of storage space and a lot of time, and like raising a glass to you, and all the work that they put in. But to the show as a whole and to the writing, I just can't. can't do it.
Yeah. Well, while we both had incredibly high expectations for Rings of Power, I don't think either of us had much expectations at all for She-Hulk. I know I didn't. I know I was like, oh, She-Hulk's out now. I feel like I'd heard about it like 5 years ago and it's like, oh, it's a show now. Did you have expectations, high expectations, low expectations, any expectations?
No, I am still confused as to why I watched the entirety of She-Hulk. Because most of the time I look at all of the Marvel side stuff that Disney is doing, and I'm like, no, I don't want it. You're just cashing in. But for some reason, I just watched that first episode and kept watching it, and I was actually kind of looking forward to each episode to find out what happens to Jen. And yeah,
So let me kind of walk us through the plot of
yeah, I think
She-Hulk.
you're much better at these than I am. I think that's what we learned.
I felt like I was reliving the first few episodes of Rings of Power as you were talking.
Oh,
And then I was like, oh no, time wise, we're going to spend like the next half hour talking about like recapping the show. People will like have felt like they'd watched it. But maybe not as interesting.
yeah. If I don't have time to like pare down what I'm going to say and think it through, then I tend to just dwell on all the details.
Okay, so premise of She-Hulk. Jennifer Walters, who we learn is Bruce Banner's cousin, is in a car driving with him. They get pushed off the road because of this weird alien plane ship. And some of Bruce Banner's blood gets into her cut because he was wearing an inhibitor that prevents him from becoming the Hulk, which we learn is by itself enough to turn her into a Hulk as well.
Yeah.
So she is now a Hulk, trying to keep her identity kind of hidden. Only herself and Nikki, who's one of her best friends, and Bruce and the audience, there's a lot of fourth wall breaking in this show, know that she's a Hulk at the beginning of the show. And she's also a lawyer. And so it's like, there's this whole idea like, oh, like what took Bruce Banner 5 years to come to be both a Hulk and himself took her about 5 minutes, or 5 weeks. There's a whole like training montage type scene with Bruce Banner, Mark Ruffalo at the beginning. A lot of cameos in the show.
Yeah.
She's like, yo, I've been doing this my whole life because I'm a woman and like I have to wear so many hats. And it's like, okay. And like there's a large aspect of like female empowerment and like calling out the haters and calling out all of like the problematic systems that benefit white males. And that's a vein that goes through this entire show. And it is not hidden. It is very clear. That's actually the main villain in the show is like, well, we'll get there.
Yeah.
In this court case that she's trying to win, all of a sudden Jamila Jamil, who plays a character called Titania, ends up in the courtroom, and she's also super strong. And in order to protect everybody, Jennifer Walters becomes her Hulk identity. At which point, and she saves the day. At which point, she is fired. Is called She-Hulk and is then rehired to work at an attorney as She-Hulk. And she's realizing, oh, like even though she did earn it, other people are thinking that she wouldn't earn it.
Yeah, she can't get a job as the normal Jen Walters. A stipulation of her new job, she works, it's a superhero division.
Yes.
And
yes, stipulation
is that she has to be She-Hulk when she's working. She can't be just Jen.
Yes. And that's the piece of the show is about. Again, if you didn't think this is what the show is about, she goes out and tells you by breaking the fourth wall in the last episode saying, no, this entire show is about me trying to come to grips with being Jennifer Walters and She-Hulk. like taking the what had been really high stakes and kind of lowering them to be more personal to herself. She ends up as her first court client, defending and winning the case for the abomination. Wong shows up, which was fun because Wong's awesome. She talks about how everybody likes Wong because it's like Twitter armor for the show for a week. Just hilarious. Again, fourth wall breaking. Mm-hmm. She ends up at a wedding where her friend refuses to let her be Jen Walters, or She-Hulk. She has to be Jen Walters. She ends up finding a guy that she likes, but it turns out this guy was actually just after her blood. A lot of sex scenes that are not shown in this show. It's because it's about her being herself, mm-hmm. And all the guys that she's getting. She's really down because the guys are all interested in her being She-Hulk, not in her being Jen Walters. And there's this whole side plot in one or two of the episodes with Titanium stealing her name. It's a thing that happens. I don't know if it's.
I like the intro with Titania's ad.
She-Hulk by Titanium.
Yeah.
And then the kind of the whole show comes down to, in the last scene, she ends up at the Abomination's retreat. He has made a statement that he will not turn into the Abomination. Instead is like a Zen dude who runs this retreat. After she's been told that, I forgot one of the main pieces of it. She's been told she can't be She-Hulk anymore because mm-hmm. she hulked out at this award ceremony for female lawyers, which again they call out straight out like, hey, like this is like we do twice the work for half the recognition, and people keep asking
Angelica Schuyler is one of the lawyers. She's fabulous.
She calls it out. It's great. And the bad guys in this are called what are they called? The Hulk King,
Intelligentsia.
And the whatevers. Yeah, Intelligentsia. And that's what the whole thing is. The whole thing is a fight on Twitter trolls.
They hack the display and they are going to show a sex tape. And so she smashes the screen.
Which everybody's like freaked out at her. And I was like, yo, like, why are people scared?
Yeah.
She was destroying a screen.
Yeah.
One of the things that we failed to mention is that Daredevil shows up.
Yeah.
At one point, there's a lot that happens in this show, which realizing makes it very hard to describe because every episode just kind of throws in more and more subplots. But Daredevil and She-Hulk become a thing. And it was really great to see Matt Murdock again.
Yeah.
There's this evil frog dude who's really stupid and not that evil. But he kidnaps a clothing designer for superheroes who is different from the previous clothing. Yada, 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 yada. Show ends with this scene where Jennifer Walters, as herself, not a She-Hulk, enters into this retreat center lodge to ask the Abomination, whatever the human version of Abomination is. It's like Elon Musk or something like that. It's not that.
No, it's not Elon. It's
Emil.
No. Emil Blonsky.
Yes. Like just some questions, and it turns out he's as the Abomination stepping into a Intelligentsia rally, and like all of a sudden now Bruce Banner shows up, and all her friends are there, and Titania shows up, and she's like, whoa, stop. And so they actually stop the filming, and then the Marvel, you think you've been locked out of Disney Plus because like the Marvel page shows up on Disney Plus, and she's like, excuse me, you can't get through it. And there's just, honestly, the whole show is worth watching. Sorry, if you're gonna watch any of this show, watch the last 5 minutes of the last episode. Because she ends up just breaking the fourth wall, like leaving She-Hulk, entering into Marvel's Assembled, talking with the writers of the show, pretty much calling them out, and then going to meet Kevin Feige. And everybody's like, no, you can't meet Kevin. You can't meet Kevin. She goes down to meet him, and it turns out Kevin is actually a robot standing for knowledge. I wish I had written this down. Knowledge something, Kevin. and he's got his black hat on, like Kevin Feige always does, which is hilarious. And she has a conversation with him where she calls out some of the Marvel tropes and has him change the final scene to pretty much get rid of everybody and add Daredevil. And she says, and I quote, "That's what Hulks do. We smash things. Bruce smashes buildings. I smash fourth walls and bad endings. And sometimes Matt Murdock."
Mm-hmm.
And that scene by itself, like, and like the things that happen, it's very funny.
Yeah.
And that's what the show is about. It's about her finding her identity as She-Hulk and as Jennifer Walters.
Why'd you watch it? I'm curious.
Why did I watch it? Did you say?
Yeah.
Oh, because we watch all of the Marvel things.
Okay.
The only Marvel things I have not watched, I've not finished. Miss Marvel.
Miss Marvel. Okay.
I'm never going to finish Shield. Agents of Shield. I think I made the first 3-4 seasons and I just gave up. It's just too much.
Wow.
I don't care. I don't care, Daisy.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. I was all about Fitzsimmons. Like I was.
Oh yeah.
Live and die Fitzsimmons. I did not watch the rest of Luke Cage, and yeah, I did because it was too scary, and I did not watch Jessica Jones after the second episode because it was terrifying. So outside, I've even seen most of Cloak and Dagger, which was on like Hulu.
Oh wow!
Like if Marvel makes it, I'll probably watch it.
Mm-hmm.
Like here's my money. I get it. I'm so excited for the new Black Panther movie.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I think that's going to be absolutely phenomenal. I think it might be the best Marvel movie. But
wow.
Who knows? So that's why we watched it. Yeah. How about you? You said you didn't plan on watching the whole thing.
No, it was just one of those things where I just clicked and watched it, and I think I kept watching for Jen, honestly. The actor who plays her does a really good job, and I don't think they could get away with the fourth wall stuff because she speaks directly to the camera a lot. I don't think they could get away with that if she didn't sell it so well. Because
she does that.
I don't know, that kind of stuff. Yeah, especially for me, is a hard sell for me. I don't like Deadpool, which if you like Deadpool, I'm glad, you like Deadpool, but I love Spider-Man. And to me, Deadpool is just like R-rated Spider-Man. And, sure, the fourth wall in the movie is like kind of funny and Ryan Reynolds is funny, but for me, that's like, it's just kind of cheap. It's like it's like a dirty joke. Like dirty jokes are pretty easy to make. And it's really easy to make a kind of lame sentence sound really forceful if you just throw in the F word. But I don't know, it is kind of cheap to me. But they did it pretty well. And Jen did a really good job of kind of making it believable, because I think that's what you're breaking the wall between you and the audience, which, takes a suspension of disbelief from the audience. And I think they did a good job of kind of preparing the audience for the final episode where it just breaks through your TV. Because they kind of up the zaniness with the fourth wall as it goes on. But I also found out that Matt Murdock was going to be in it, and so I think that's why I kept watching, is I wanted to see Matt Murdock. I just
show me Daredevil.
Yeah, I love Charlie Cox's Matt Murdock. It's
so incredible.
But yeah, and I don't know. I liked the energy, I guess, which is didn't think I would. It's a very I'm a white man. We're both white men, and we're to some extent maybe we're mansplaining too much, but I just
Ouch.
they have Cardi B in there, and I don't really listen to Cardi B, but all of the tracks and things, I think they did a really good job of communicating the like uh the resistance that you face as a woman in the workplace. I guess especially as a lawyer, in those kinds of jobs, the misogyny and harassment, and I haven't really experienced that firsthand. Um, I can empathize with it, and uh, I have kind of a countercultural life, not nearly to the same extent. I'm not trying to equate my experience with being a woman in a workplace and experiencing that level of discrimination. But Virginia Woolf talks about how a lot of writers, she's talking about male writers, and she says, when they sat down to write, the world asked them a question. The world just had a massive indifference to their writing. Why write? It's useless. Why would you put words on a page? What's that going to do? And for the woman sitting down to write, especially in Virginia Woolf's time, it wasn't just indifference; it was outright resistance. Um,
Mm.
but I identify with having to resist that kind of cultural pressure, which to some extent is internal. But I don't know. I just like the energy of it, of kind of pushing back against it, and I
Mm.
can empathize with it. Um,
I think both of these shows are getting a lot of pushback from a lot of critics. I was watching some YouTube videos trying to figure out what people's thoughts are on She-Hulk, and there was a lot of angry men talking about it.
Intelligentsia.
And right, I mean, and I think that Rings of Power deserves some of the pushback. I think the quality of the show itself, like the storytelling, just wasn't there, and so it's not the type of story that we're interested in talking about. And like even as we were talking about it, we talked about the visual aspects of it and a couple subplots and scenes that might have impacted us. Whereas I think the overall storytelling narrative in this show is much better, and I don't think it deserves a pushback. And it was definitely fun to watch. And I appreciate
Yeah.
that I really like the fourth wall breaking. I think that it was also nice to kind of see Marvel take another step into like making fun of itself.
Yeah. It's
And I got to be honest, at the same point, I think that this is not a cohesive show and in that everything doesn't like come together. And she makes fun of that at the last episode of saying, hey, like, why are there all these things happening? And a certain aspect of me really likes it when things come together. It makes things make more sense as to why they're in the show. But maybe maybe this show feels more like just watching somebody's life, and that's what it's about. Watching her life as first she says as a lawyer, but then it's really as Jen Walters / She-Hulk, and like one of the most gripping moments in this show is when Jen is in Emil Blonsky's lodge earlier on the show, and it's a really really great scene. It's kind of set up like a group therapy session. It is a group therapy session.
Yeah.
And she says something along the lines of, having She-Hulk is like being able to turn into the most popular person in school, which is theoretically great, but she's still Jen. And she's had so many experiences in the show where people are interested in her because she is She-Hulk.
Yeah.
And when she becomes Jen Walters, they stop being interested. The guys that were interested in her stop being interested in her, which is the kind of one of the subplots I didn't really talk about as much, but is probably one of the more important subplots. The reason she's able to like reclaim the name She-Hulk is because she had a dating profile with the name She-Hulk, and she had a dating profile with the name Jen Walters, and all of the dates she got were because she was She-Hulk, and the guys she was with were interested in her because she was She-Hulk. And there's a scene where she becomes Jen Walters afterwards, and this guy's like, "Oh, I'm going." She's like, "Well, it's hot doctor's a cliche, anyways." Which is kind of one of the fun points when Matt Murdock comes in. And even though they do things with Daredevil's character that I don't think are maybe, I wasn't.
I was just so happy to see him that I didn't really think about it, and I thought about it afterwards, and I was like,
there's a fun piece of like he's interested in Jen, and like that's the type of character that Matt Murdock is, and it's the type of character that Jennifer Walters is. She's very well acted, and I'm hoping to see them come together in Hell's Kitchen. I think that'd be kind of cool to see.
Yeah.
I don't know if it will be, but the storytelling for this show was better. But I still do think that there was just too many. I can't give you a cohesive. I tried, right? Obviously, at the beginning of this episode, I tried kind of giving a cohesive, like, this is what happens, and like there is a theme, but there's so many things that happen, and it's only 8 episodes long, and
I fell into a kind of the YouTube criticism circle of The Last Jedi. Watched a lot of stuff about it. I had a strong reaction to The Last Jedi, and I discovered that for me personally, if I am noticing plot holes, it's usually a symptom not that the writing is bad, but that I don't like it. Because The Last Jedi is not bad writing. There are plot holes. There are characters I don't like. There's other stuff.
An entire subplot that's not worth it.
Yeah. But The Empire Strikes Back has plot holes. Luke falls. When Luke falls after his arm is cut off, he somehow survives. And Bespin when they go and pick him up. I mean, it's Star Wars. All kinds of crazy stuff happens in Star Wars. So it's, but I just didn't like what they did with Luke Skywalker's character, because he was an important character to me in the lore of Star Wars, and I didn't like the direction that they took with him. And over time, I've come to the conclusion that, like, unless it's like a black hole of a plot hole, plot holes don't really matter to me. Life has plot holes. There's all kinds of weird stuff that happens. People make dumb decisions. And yeah, it's kind of weird that, like, she becomes She-Hulk. Just the way she becomes She-Hulk is, you could say, is kind of weird. And, like, they end up scratching the whole thing where Intelligentsia gets her blood and that guy's going to turn himself into a Hulk. She's like, oh yeah, maybe it shouldn't work like that, in her conversation with Kevin. And like, sure, you could call that a plot hole and then on the surface and say, oh, the show is bad because of that. But it's Marvel. Like,
Yeah.
like nothing makes sense in Marvel, but that's not the point. The point of Marvel is not to be hard science fiction. It's to tell stories. And
Yeah.
I liked the story that they told. And I don't think you can say,
And it tells stories that relate to our culture right here, right now.
yeah. And it's a story that is pretty well told, as well. Um, and I don't know. I suspect I haven't watched any of the criticism, and I don't plan to because that is a black hole. That whole space. And look, if you don't like it, you don't like it. That's fine. But personally, the question to ask is not, is this show good, bad? Is this show bad, or is this show good? The question is, how does it make me feel, and why?
Yeah.
And I don't know. I liked it. I felt kind of like camaraderie with Jen, which is, oh God, don't cancel me. But she's a good character. She's really. I'm
yeah,
falling
she's
apart.
a great
Help
character.
me.
Yeah, no, this is. I think it's safe to say that we both would raise a glass to this one.
Yeah.
I think that across. I'm trying to think about both shows because both shows are coming out at the same time, and that's that they're coming out at the same moment, and they both have like the primary character in both shows is a strong female character, and yet they're very different shows, and I think that She-Hulk does a really good job of speaking into our culture right here, right now, and there are many pieces that you just, as you shared, that we can't understand because we're men, and many things I don't understand because I'm not a lawyer as well. That's just a random joke. I don't know if that'll land. And I think I'm also learning in this that, or realizing just how much I need you in these types of episodes, because I feel like anything that I've enjoyed about our conversation so far have been things that you have said. So I appreciate your ability to, again, kind of take us out of just talking about the show to talking about kind of what's at work behind it, or other things that you've read, or I mean, we've talked about Star Wars off book so many times, like so many times. We talked about The Last Jedi.
Oh yeah, yep,
for hours. I think that was probably years ago.
Yeah.
And I just like blitzed through all 6 episodes of Andor today.
Oh wow.
And one of the reasons I really enjoyed it is because it has much more of a Rogue One feel. And while it's still Star Wars, it feels like an actual, like, unique type story. And one where I care about the characters. So I don't know. And like, again, that's also coming out at the same time. It's interesting to see kind of what's coming out. Neither of us watched the HBO House of the Dragon one.
No, I don't have HBO anymore.
Which I'm sure we talked about. No, neither do I. But I know people were talking about comparing those to each other.
Yeah, I mean, I could talk about Game of Thrones, but I don't think you've seen it, and I don't know if you're planning on watching it either. So,
not really.
But
this one of the things I think that was really good about She-Hulk, as somebody who's watched pretty much all of the MCU shows, like the Disney Plus MCU ones, again finishing Ms. Marvel, is that it feels very different from the other shows. And while I did not enjoy it as much as some of the other ones, like Captain America Winter Soldier, like that hit me in all the feels, especially the last episode. Um, this I was excited every week when the next episode of She-Hulk came out.
Yeah.
And my wife and I, Melanie and I, watched it every week. While when it came to Rings of Power, I watched it. But sometimes I was like 3 or 4 days late, and I wasn't worried about that at all. Whereas with She-Hulk, we watch it usually on Thursday or Friday whenever we have the opportunity.
Yeah.
And that says something about a show and how much you enjoy it.
Yeah. I watched it as soon as I could, pretty much. I don't know. I really appreciated that it was different as well. That's something that I liked about WandaVision.
Mm-hmm.
Like the first 4 episodes were really creative and just so many little things in the way that they replicated the look of old TV shows and stuff. It was so much fun. And then it just kind of became Marvel again, and I finished it, but I was like, darn it. She-Hulk it wasn't as crazy, but it was different and it was fun. And I think for me, at least, if I watch anything else in Phase 4, it's because She-Hulk carried Phase 4 all by herself for me.
Okay. Wow. That's awesome. That's great. I'm glad you feel that way. Mm-hmm. I'm saying this now because I meant to say it earlier. And so it's a bad thing to leave with, but it's something that I was thinking earlier. And I think one of the things that confused me about watching She-Hulk is sometimes the CGI of She-Hulk was amazing and she looked real. And then there would be other scenes, sometimes in the same episodes, where she just was so clearly fake. And it was frustrating to me when those types of things would happen. Because I go from being like, it went from being, just part of the life to being distracting to me. And that was a small thing. It didn't impact too much, but it was enough in those scenes that I was like, kind of took me out of it. While the rest kind of drew me in.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I could see that. It's an uncanny valley, which is really hard to do. Like that Luke that they brought in Mandalorian. Like,
yeah.
What am I looking at here?
Yeah. I just, because they did it so well in some of the scenes, I was like, I think if it had been the same throughout, I would have been fine. It wouldn't have brought me in and out of kind of seeing it.
Yeah. I guess
that's a small thing.
One more thing, I guess, is a better thing to leave with, I hope, is a positive. I really liked how She-Hulk dived more into the real world of Marvel. Because with Doctor Strange and other Thor big movies, you are kind of on this like cosmic scale that, is really has a lot of potential for spectacle. But She-Hulk is about the law, like superhuman law. There's multiple court cases in here, and you get more of
the court case of the immortal man and all of his ex-spouses. I totally forgotten about that until that's probably one of the funniest parts of this entire
it's just
show. I'm remembering so much more of this show that I'm enjoying. That was so, and you're going to make prolonged eye contact with, whatever his ex-wife was for 15 seconds. Really? 20 seconds. So funny. Yeah. So funny.
Yeah. And like, that's something you don't get in the movies and a lot of the TV shows, honestly. Is just kind of the day to day, what it would be like to live in this crazy universe where like New York is getting destroyed every 3 months. it, which I think it's something maybe Stanley said, or might have been Kevin. Honestly, I don't know. They said like Marvel is the world outside your window, outside your bedroom window, and it's very close to our world, but a little more fun. And I don't know. I like the way She-Hulk dove into that. And I don't know. Maybe I'm talking too much, but one more thing is, I don't know. I didn't. This is a very feminist show. I don't really have a problem because there is lots of stuff for the men's in Marvel. So much stuff, so much more. So
thanks for calling us out in the mansplaining part of things. That was kind of like,
yeah, I was like, thinking about that this whole time. I was like, yeah, two guys talking about She-Hulk. I wonder how that's gonna sound on Twitter. Not that.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. While Hulk and She-Hulk smash lots of things, and a lot of critics seem to be smashing the show, that's not our perspective at all.
No.
In fact, I think we'd say it smashed one out of the park. Or at least a ground rule double.
Yeah. Smashed our expectations, our non-expectations.
Yeah, it's nice going into a show without high expectations, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
And like maybe if we entered Rings of Power with the same lack of expectations and lack of anticipation, because we've been waiting for the show for a while, and we knew it was going to be visually spectacular. We're just wondering about the rest of it.
Yeah.
Whereas with
sorry. I didn't really have. I tried not to have expectations for Rings of Power because I was very skeptical of.
Yes, you tried not to.
The idea of doing a Silmarillion in a show, and like, I don't know. I tried to write a poem while I was watching the Rings of Power. I just said, there are some places a screen cannot go, a deep magic pixels cannot comprehend. And that was Rings of Power for me. And I wanted it to be good. Like, I really wanted it to be good. I didn't necessarily expect it to be good, but I really, really wanted it to be. And it looked like it might be from the trailers. So I guess in that way I had high expectations.
Well, thank you for carrying this episode, Hunter. I appreciate it.
Welcome. And, thanks for listening and asking questions. You do give much better summaries than I do.
Well, I'm glad to hear that you also think I did a bad job in this episode. So thanks for that. No. As an affirmation-driven person, I appreciate your de-affirmation.
Oh, no.
I was definitely fishing for a compliment.
There is no one I would rather do this podcast with.
Same here, Hunter. Have a great night. Great talking with you.
You too.
Hulk out.
Smash. There's no like button though.